Hello, my name is Matthew East. I'm making a series of videos documenting some of the just insane experiences I've had working with the NDIS scheme, working for some of the organizations I've come across, and just some of the truly horrific situations which I've seen and been a part of. And today I'm going to touch on the kind of people who often find themselves in positions of power and authority in when working with people with disabilities. Um, Put plainly, people are often chasing a halo. They're interested in doing this kind of work because they get to think to themselves, I'm a fantastic person, I'm helping the disadvantaged, I'm working with vulnerable people. The issue is that many of these people who want to be that are kind of terrible. Um, and then they're in a power and authority over both the vulnerable person and the people who are working with the vulnerable people. And before I start talking about that, I want to bring it back to a group of people that most people in society have an opinion of, and that's the police. And before I talk about the NDIS, I want to talk about my first role as a psych, prov psych, which was working in vocational rehabilitation. It's a very strange kind of role. What happens is that there's a person contracts a psychological injury in the workplace, such as post-traumatic stress disorder. Their HR department doesn't really know how to deal with it. They get a consultant to come in and try and fix the problem. And the first experience I have doing that work is working with this lady in the Australian Federal Police who, due to some just terrible internal politics, goes from being a detective in a very prestigious arm of the AFP to doing a much more generic policing kind of role. And what happened in her instance is that she'd been working, um, in her team, and she just got a feeling that something wasn't right with her boss's, the boss's wife. It's very common with police that they get a bit frayed from their work, and they take it out on their loved ones. And in addition to that, a lot of people who become police officers, they're attracted to the position of authority, the ability to have power over other people, that within that population, regrettably, there is a bit of domestic violence. So she has this inkling that something's not right with this guy's wife. And she doesn't make any accusations. She just is like, hey, what's going on here? And she talks to just a colleague about it. And then she gets brought into the boss's office. Well, not the boss's office, like someone who's associated with the boss. And they're like, hey, I heard you made a false, not a false allegation. You've made an allegation of sexual assault. And she's like, no, I didn't do that. Because this is the thing everyone gets sensitive about. It's usually some sort of sexual misconduct thing. A lot of false allegations get made. It's something that a lot of people in positions of authority, they tend to be scared of a bit. But either way, she's like, no, I didn't do that. Just like, all I did is I just noted that there was something kind of off with this guy's wife. I thought she was a little bit, she's not acting like normal people. I work with a lot of domestic violence issues. Like, something's kind of off. And what happens is that she's then outcast from the entire department because they think that she's attacked the boss, attacked their comrade, and that she's made this sexual misconduct allegation, which she never did. And she goes from having this amazing job to just doing generic stuff, and by all accounts was great at it. Having talked about how dodgy people often want to become police officers, I'm now going to talk to you about why dodgy people want to become psychs and positive behavior support practitioners. And I'm going to talk to you about this by talking about a person I know called John. John is an interesting character. John was my first boss when I was doing positive behavior support, which is when you have a psych or some other healthcare professional who's responsible for a person who has behaviors which put themselves or other people in trouble. Um, like they might be have proclivity for violence. We don't want that. Society doesn't want that. We need someone to figure out how to stop knives from entering people's bodies, and that's my job. And and John was this guy who hired me to do this work. He claimed to be an expert at it. He wasn't. He was this strange blowhard guy who walked around the office with a cigar in his mouth and would offer me to do shots of vodka with him at 10 a.m. in the morning. He had love and pain tattooed on his knuckles, which was pretty cool. And I thought that he was what we call in the industry the lived experience bloke, the guy who himself has had a pretty hard life, and he obviously had a very difficult life. And through overcoming that adversity, they're now able to interact with everyone and train everyone on how to work with that community. And I think he did have that a bit of that capability. He wasn't completely useless. But John, he was not in this industry for the right reasons. John loved to talk. He loved to go on about these very strange rants about how you need to we're protecting the vulnerable, and it, it was interesting. It was an experience working with him. Um, the issue was that it's okay if someone's a little bit unhinged. It's okay if they're a bit eccentric. Heaven knows, no one would tolerate me if society didn't have a little bit of wiggle room for uh, passionate and interesting people. But his problem is that his eccentricities were related to narcissism, um, probably to the point where it could be pathologized as a disorder. He needed validation. And if you're the person who's in charge of a vulnerable person who is doing work which would be morally considered good, um, then you kind of get a little bit of a halo to wear. You get a story to tell yourself about how good of a person you are. And you can tell other people, like, hey, I'm the guy who's, in charge of making sure knives don't enter people's bodies. I'm the guy who is, like, I take care of the mentally ill people. I am such a nice, good, caring person. And that was John to a T. The problem was he he kind of got lost in the stories he told himself. There was the stories he was telling himself about how he was this great successful CEO. So he dressed himself like this Richie Rich billionaire character. He'd have the cigar in his mouth and he would talk about how great his business was and how like he had so much money that didn't mean anything to him. Um, which later on turned into his company facing bankruptcy at least twice. He drove everyone away. So when I first started working with him, previously all of the staff had left to go to work for another company. And with the three people who had been in his office, including myself as the positive behavior support staff, by the end of 3 months, all of us had left. Why? Well, bullying. So what would happen? One of them, he wrote a report which wasn't fantastic. So what his solution to this was to read the report line by line in front of all of us and tell us each part of it he didn't like. Um, there was another one he accused of theft, which would have been incredible to execute because one, she was very junior and didn't really know enough to be able to steal in the way that he described her stealing as, and I doubt she did because after I left, he accused me of theft as well. And at the same time, because he's constantly bullying all the staff and they're all leaving, no one in the office is able to learn how to do the job properly. The most senior person in the company had been there for 6 months, and that was the person who was training me. And the result is that we were providing a service to the community which was not at a standard high enough to be to be considered positive behavior support. It was just us writing a letter, giving some general ideas of how we should care for these people, but there was no, it wasn't at a standard high enough that the rate that we were charging, which was $150 per hour, and a single report might take 8 hours or even 12 or 14 hours to complete. So these reports um, and instruction that we're doing and preparing, it adds up. So we might take $3,000 or $4,000 from an individual client. Um, yeah, we were stealing a lot of money, a shit ton of money, um, and it was dangerous. When it really hit me how completely over my head I was, and my head everyone in the company was when I was working with this woman who was ripping her teeth out. Um, like, yeah, she had this very strange neurological condition where she got sensory pleasure from removing teeth, and there was these gloves that had to be put on her, similar to stop her from getting the stuff out of her mouth. Um, and I had no bloody idea how I was going to stop that from happening. Um, because they were trying to find a way to get the gloves off and get her to be able to use her hands again. And my job was to facilitate that intervention. And no one in the company know how to do it either. But John was sending me in to work with this client and try and figure it out. Um, and I just thought, okay, this is dangerous. I'm going to quit. And I suppose this is where things jump up another level, because this guy, he's had most of the staff who've worked for him leave him. He feels abandoned. Um, he has an ego that he needs to serve because he's this amazing person in his mind, and it's not being validated in the environment, and that hurts him. So he doesn't let me leave. He tries to indenture me. This is 21st century Australia, and I've got a person who tries to use my contract, which I don't think he understood legally how contracts work. There are parts which are enforceable and not enforceable. And he demands that I stay on for a month. I don't know what I'm going to do in that month because there's no clients for me to see. I've got one report which I'm writing, and that's all the work I have for this time. And I have to go through the process of getting a lawyer to get myself separated from this insane narcissist who's been exploiting and stealing from the NDIS and all these participants. Um, Now, eventually I get out. It's not fun. Don't work with narcissistic people, and if you notice someone is like that, leave immediately. Uh, but there are some things that we can all learn from this experience. Like, I've had some truly horrific uh, experiences in the NDIS. I'd like some of the things that have happened to me to at least be useful and to pass something on from it. I think we need to improve the way that positive behaviour support practitioners are certified in Australia. The way positive behaviour support practitioners are certified in Australia is through a process of works. So there'll be a more senior positive behaviour support practitioner overseeing a junior person. There'll be a client come through who, um, there might be what is called a restricted practice, where we need to approve something such as a Houdini jacket, a straight jacket. And once that person has done something like that, they're able to have this form, they're able to upload it to the NDIS website in something called a self-assessment, and that proves that they're now proficient. It's a very low level of capability that we have in these professionals. It's a very difficult job. It's an incredibly important job. It needs to be certified better. I think just even if we improve the level to say a certificate 3, that could be completed whilst also working in the industry, so that we guarantee that there is training, there is actual capability in these people, and then using that to be able to get a high level of certification with the NDIS. Um, with John, he was able to run a pretty major PBS business through just being around long enough. He didn't have anyone to properly learn the trade from. The person he previously was in business with left, unsurprisingly, and everyone in his organization who had to work with him left as well. So there was no opportunity there for them to develop competency by doing the work. And yeah, that's the moral of the story. Thanks for listening.